Just one more second. Okay, I think we are now live, so go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, welcome everyone. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to this side event on leveraging digital technologies for social inclusion. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank also ITU, UNCTAD, and of course the Office of the UN Envoy on Technology for your collaboration. And thanks also to the Division for Inclusive Social Development that I lead. So I'm not thanking myself, but actually I want to thank the ISD team, particularly Wing Yang and Makiko, Isabel and Pega, for the amazing work they have been doing. And of course also to Amin, our information officer, who is contributing enormously to the success of these events. So I'm very happy to share with you today a preview of key messages from the policy brief, which has been typeset for release by DESA. That is the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, where there is the Division for Inclusive and Social Development. And I hope that this brief will be used to policymakers, will be useful to policymakers and the general public in our efforts to leverage digital technologies to create more inclusive and equitable societies, which is the focus of the event of today. So, ladies and gentlemen, the last decade has witnessed a fast-paced digitalization process, which has been drastically accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And since the beginning of the crisis, digital technologies have been employed not only in the immediate response to sustain daily lives, where internet is available, and support business continuity and provide services, but also as part of government's recovery plans. For instance, over 90% of ministries of education have enacted some form of policy to provide the digital and broadcast remote learning, including radio broadcasting, to address the needs of students who may have been impacted by COVID-19 and its crisis. So according to a survey from the US-based Enterprise Technologies Research, ETR, the percentage of permanent remote workers will rise from 16.4% before the coronavirus outbreak in 2020 to 34.4% in 2021. Yes, this is really a rapid digital transformation. And we have to say that is doubled in terms of complications sometimes and possible increase of the gap of inequalities by a sword for social inclusion. What I'm trying to say is that while digital technologies have brought tremendous benefits, they also risk exacerbating inequalities and deepening exclusion of disadvantaged groups and communities. See, the digital divides between and within countries, rural and urban, between the privileged and people who are poorer, between youth and older persons, or the gender digital divide, or persons with disabilities and indigenous peoples, well, all of this will further widen socioeconomic inequalities and leave behind those who are not connected. And this is estimated by, in terms of something like 3 billion people who do not use the internet. So the digital divide is intrinsically interconnected with existing socioeconomic inequality. This means that already disadvantaged groups and those in vulnerable situations are overrepresented in the offline population, which is disproportionately female, rural, poor, elderly, and with limited education and low literacy. So in 2019, according to ITU, only 47% of people in developing countries, and 19% in the least developed countries were online. Therefore, globally, the percentage of households with access to the internet at home in urban areas is around 72%, and it's almost twice than in rural areas, where it is around 38%. Further, the gender digital divide exists globally, with only 48% of women using the internet compared to 58% of men. So similarly, disadvantaged groups, including older persons, as I said, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and others are being left behind across all regions globally. The full leverage and how to full leverage the potential of ICTs in accelerating the implementation of the 2030 agenda. In order to do that, we needed to ensure safe and equal access to ICTs for all people of all ages and of all abilities. And this will require investing in ICT infrastructures, especially in rural areas, and improving the affordability of the internet and enhancing digital skills, and make sure that it is accessible also to people with sensory impairments or other kind of disabilities. So to bridge the digital divide and ensure that ICT benefits everyone, including the most vulnerable in the society, a whole of government and a whole of society approach are needed. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, during the Commission for Social Development, member states have shared good practices and innovative approaches at the various levels, particularly the national level. So building on that, I hope this event will initiate a conversation among different stakeholders to explore how we can elaborate a common agreed framework to promote digital inclusion, which is necessary to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 agenda and its 17 goals decided by 194 countries. It is only by the closing of the digital divide that we can recover better and really enable socially just transition towards sustainable development for all. And I look forward to the outcome of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you very much for your opening remark, which really sets the context very well for this site event, and really highlight the key issues that we are trying to address. And also allow me to add my welcome to everybody to this online event. It's really it has been a very interesting session of the Commission for Social Development, with the priorities theme on socially just transition towards sustainable development, the role of digital technologies on social development and well-being for all. And this site event really connects very well with the priority theme of the Commission. As Daniela mentioned, the site event is also organized on the occasion of the anticipated release of a department policy brief with the title Leveraging Digital Technology for Social Development. As Daniela said, is as we are discussing now here, it's being typeset, and it shall be on our website anytime. It's very exciting, anytime soon. So allow me to just, the benefits of being at this event is that you will be the first ones to know what this policy brief is about and what's covered in this policy brief. So I take this opportunity as the moderator to indulge in this, sharing this information. I believe it will be appreciated. So this policy brief, as I said, the title is Leveraging Digital Technology for Social Inclusion. The policy brief examines the impact of the rapid digitalization process, which has been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. That the impact on social inclusion and its implications for an inclusive and equitable recovery from the pandemic. While recognizing the expanding opportunities provided by digital technologies, the brief also warns against the risks of further exacerbating inequalities and exclusion of disadvantaged groups and communities who are not digitally connected or digitally literate. The policy brief highlights the fact that half of the world's population is still offline and advocates for the promotion of a digital inclusion based on the notion of access to the internet as a public good. There are pressing needs to bridge the digital divide in its multiple levels, including between and within countries, between urban and rural, and the gender digital divide, as well as between young people and older persons, generational divide. To close the digital divide, the brief proposes to develop a common framework based on 4 key dimensions, that is access, affordability, digital skills and literacy, and finally, awareness and relevance of online content. This will require a holistic approach across sectors and based on multi-stakeholder partnerships, including in the design of inclusive ICT, science, technology, and innovation policies, and regulatory environments that facilitate digital inclusion. So this is a gist of the key messages and the key content, main content of this soon to be released policy brief. Before I go to the panel discussion, inviting our panelists to share from their own perspective the role of digital technology on promoting social inclusion, and to share their experiences, good practices in promoting digital inclusion. Allow me to just give a couple of minutes to one of the authors of this policy brief, Ms. Adriana Alberti, who is the Chief of Program Management and Capacity Development Unit in the Division for Public Institution and Digital Governance of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. We are in the same department, but she is in a different division. So Adriana, can you share with the audience in a couple, 2 to 3 minutes, the perspective and the main contribution from your division's angle? Adriana, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Wenyan, and I would like to thank you and your division for the opportunity to collaborate in the preparation of this very important policy brief. I would like to share a few key messages to complement what was already mentioned, because I think that both the director and yourself have covered very well most of the elements in the policy brief. And I would just like to highlight 4 key messages from a governance perspective. First, that the current pandemic has highlighted the critical role that effective governance and institutions play in ensuring or not digital inclusion of all. Second, as you already mentioned, to harness the potential of digital technologies for all, there is a need to build capacities across all sectors of society as part of digital government transformation. And in this context, it is essential to develop capacity of the public sector, including at the institutional, organizational, and also the technical capacities, as well as promoting leadership and commitment for innovation and digital inclusion. Third, to bridge the digital divides, there is also a need not only to develop digital literacy and digital skills, which we know are fundamental, but there is also a need to foster inclusive, experimental, and digital mindsets. And mindsets are a set of values and beliefs about ourselves and about the world around us, and these shape our behavior. So mindsets really affect the way we think, we see, and how we act. So if, for example, people have concerns over accessing the internet for online services and they prefer face-to-face communication, then digital technologies will not be used. If nobody uses technologies because of their beliefs and attitudes towards technology, then as you mentioned, Wenyan, awareness campaigns and effective public communication are needed to shift mindsets. In essence, changing mindsets among public servants and society is as important as promoting the use of digital technologies. It matters for how governments shape policies to ensure digital inclusion of all. And Wenyan, allow me also just to mention that we concluded a very insightful side event, one of your side events. And so I would like to also share with the audience that also thanks to the collaboration with your division that provided insightful advice, we have finalized a training toolkit on government innovation for social inclusion of vulnerable groups that tackles issues of how to use and promote digital technologies. And so we are very thankful to you and to your division for your contribution. And this training toolkit will be available on the UN Public Administration Network website. And I also invite the distinguished participants to access this training of trainers toolkit. And I thank you very much, Wenyan. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Ariana, and your additional messages on the importance of governance is indeed much appreciated. So now let's start the panel discussion. Just a couple of words of housekeeping. As we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 speakers, and the time we have is very precious. Not to mention the fact that we are located in different time zones. For some of the participants, it's very late for you. So that may I ask all the speakers to really try to be concise, and if you can, to make your statements in 5 minutes, that would be much appreciated. But please don't exceed the 7-minute allotment, so that we will have time for interaction and discussion, which will be beneficial to the to the audience. So without further ado, may I invite Ms. Carla Lisiadello, who is a Digital Inclusion Coordinator of the International Telecommunication Union. Carla, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon to evening to everyone. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and a big congratulations to the DESA team for the very comprehensive and holistic policy brief. I would say that Ms. Bass, she really framed a little bit the discussion very well in her intervention. The COVID pandemic, as we said, has accelerated the digital transition and revealed the challenges that still exist when it comes to connecting households and people, as well as the digital skills required to participate effectively in the online world. And unfortunately, the ongoing fallout from this pandemic is so catastrophic for the lives of billions. And as a result of the pandemic, the need for a digitally competent population and the demand for a digitally skilled workforce has grown even more pronounced. Just to give a couple of examples, early in 2021, the 90% of students worldwide were affected by school closures. 1 in 5 school children globally, or 320 million, could not go to school at the beginning of this year, moving their entire world online. But not all children have the necessary knowledge, skills, and resources to keep themselves safe online. So I'm very happy to hear from Alberta about the safety element that is also included in the policy brief. And they don't really know how to really use technology for educational purposes. We also know, as it has been alluded by the previous speakers, that women are suffering disproportionately. They are more likely to have lost their jobs. They are more likely to had their long-term educational prospects compromised. And the thing that we saw the Malala Foundation warn that as many as 20 million girls may never return to school following the wave of classroom closures. So what is really the COVID pandemic is the urgent need of action. It has shown us that we urgently need better international and national frameworks, norms, and concrete policies so that we can better coordinate and strengthen international cooperation around the inclusion of vulnerable groups in digital environments. And this is why we really feel that the policy brief is really coming at a crucial time, because we really hope that everyone, independently on the role and on the capacity that is covering, can really use the policy brief as a good framework for action. Inclusion in itself is in itself a goal, but is also a powerful enabler. Inclusion can help accelerate connectivity for sustainable development. Leaving no one behind in the digital world means ensuring that technology is people-centered. This encompasses that no one is offline due to the lack of connectivity or due to the lack of accessibility of digital information, products, and services. And it is important to have appropriate policies, strategies, and actions that address the specific needs of digital inclusion of women and girls, youth, children, persons with disabilities, the older persons, indigenous peoples, and people living in rural areas. We all have a role to play. We all have a responsibility to cover in a way that that everyone has access to devices and network, and that everyone is trained in meaningful digital skills, and that connectivity is easily affordable. And the last point, I think that is also covered, which is where I wanted to put a little bit the focus here, and then I will close because I'm concerned about time, is around the role of partnership. Multi-stakeholder partnerships are crucial and are the key element to really allow that no one is left behind. At the ITU, we take this very seriously. We have a broad range of partnerships which are focusing on supporting the development and empowerment of youth, but also of other communities such as women, girls, indigenous people, children, and people with disabilities and elderly. We have partnerships such as EQUAS that have been achieved quite a lot in the last 5 years. And we also have partnerships such as Generation Connect that we recently launched, and that we really think that is a good framework for action to really engage young people in the technological development. And with that, I hand over to you and happy to take any questions right after. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carla, both for your inputs, your insights, as well as for sticking to the time limit. Next, may I invite Mr. Clovis Freire, who is a Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy, who works in the Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy section for UNCTAD. Clovis, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. If I may, can I just share my screen for a little bit? Can you see my screen? Thank you. So thank you very much again for the invitation, and congratulations for the policy brief. As you have already heard, the COVID-19 pandemic has showed us the critical role of digital technology in so many areas, using digital solutions such as e-learning, e-health, telework, e-commerce, and e-government. But the pandemic has also exposed digital gaps, the lack of internet access, low network speed, gaps in skills, and social factors that affect the access and participation of people. Many firms also were not ready. They had not deployed digital solutions in their core functions. So these digital divides have exposed the fact that digital and socioeconomic inequalities have become very much interlinked. This is actually the biggest challenge of closing the digital divide. As the digital world and the physical world become more integrated, closing the digital divide becomes closing the socioeconomic divides. So this is a really big challenge. So as we know, there are many different perspectives in dealing with the digital divide. The technological perspective focuses on physical access to ensure availability. The economic perspectives focus on supporting ICT sector, markets, competition, and innovation to increase ICT availability and affordability. We have the educational perspective focused on digital skills and to improve the readiness of people to use digital solutions. The social perspective is concerned with the inclusion and participation of all people. Then they focus on affordability, readiness, and relevance of digital applications. We have the persuasive perspective that is more related to developed countries and deals with people that do not want to use tech solutions because perhaps they have some digital concerns like data security, for example. And more recently, the perspective that I would like to focus also is on economic structure perspective. The goal is to support the digitalization of production sectors and the structural transformation of the economies. So the focus is the production and not only on e-commerce or digital finance. So all these digital divide is a very complex problem, and all these perspectives are valid and all are needed. Now, before I continue, I want to make the point that it's critical to see that there are not only one, but two waves of digital transformation. One is the digital revolution of Web 2.0 technologies that is at its peak, and it was already affected most sectors of developed countries and has made good headways in high-income developing countries. We have now seen a big push for digitalization and e-commerce in low-income developing countries. There are also signs of further deployment of these technologies of the digital revolution that go into the global south. The other technological wave is based on the technologies of Industry 4.0, AI, robotics, IoT, blockchain. And this wave is at its initial stage in the technological revolution paradigm. So for many people in low-income countries, AI, robots, and blockchain and those things are things of very distant future because they are still mostly living at the beginning of the previous technological revolution. So we have all these challenges and to deal with a combination of technological revolutions. So there are several interventions to deal with this challenge, and the strategies for digital transformation and to handle digital divide are different combination of these interventions. For example, in UNCTAD, we have promoted e-trade for all, with a focus on increasing participation in digital economy. ITU has a strong focus historically on infrastructure. The regional commissions, ESCAP, also focus on infrastructure, Asia Pacific Information Superhighway. ECLAC has a focus on digital markets, digital platforms upgrade. World Bank has a focus on entrepreneurship, skills, finance, and so on. So there are several different strategies that deals with many interventions, and all of them are needed. So all of these are important. But at the same time, countries should be able to set priorities to drive the digital transformations by developing and matching digital innovation strengths to their social and business needs to address emerging opportunities and also development. So countries should be concerned with the deployment of the digital technologies of the Web 2.0, but also thinking about the new frontier technologies. This strategy is extremely context specific. So let me give an example. Like Mexico and Thailand, they may choose focus on different strategies, but perhaps focus more on emerging Industry 4.0 technologies. And the deployment of digital infrastructure, the development of skills will be related to that. But then you have countries, the low-income developing countries, perhaps Nepal, Ethiopia, may have priority on the deployment of Web 2.0 technologies. So the digitalization of the economy, of the sectors like garments and so on. So they may focus on digitalization at this aspect, they also should consider the new technologies of the new paradigms. So what is the problem then? The main problem is that in countries, usually developing countries, we have lack of a low capacity to design and drive such target digital strategies. Many lack awareness. There's a common misconception that this paradigm of the digital age is the same as the Industry 4.0. They also think that they are mainly related to e-commerce, and they don't realize that they also require the transformation of their production structure and the access to people to digital technologies. So there's also the lack of institutional capacity to drive this process, and the lack of coherence of the different strategies and vision on the benefits of the digital ecosystems that create synergies. So to address this problem, first we have to raise awareness. Second, we have to enhance institutional capacity of governments and other key stakeholders through capacity development, learning by doing, and so on. And third, we have to strengthen the innovation ecosystem for digital transformation in these countries. So I will stop here, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Clovis, and thank you for bringing the elements of context. Depends on the country's stage of development, that their priorities might be different and the challenges might be different. And also thank you for bringing the more forward-looking, the second wave considerations. Very, very insightful, very interesting. Now allow me to move on to Ms. Yuping Chen, who is a Senior Program Officer in the Office of the Envoy on Technology in the United Nations. Yuping, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Wenyan, and much thanks to DESA and DESA colleagues for inviting the Office of the Tech Envoy to be here today. I think a lot of us have come to realize over the last 1-2 years, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, how critical digital technologies are to our lives. And even though it might have been seen as a fringe luxury before, the fact that it is now deemed so essential to us meeting online, working, children schooling, basic access to telehealth, telemedicine, and basic e-governmental services. I think it has been one of the, I don't want to say benefits of COVID, but one of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we realize how much our lives are underlined by the strand of connectivity and digital technologies. And hence, as a corollary to that, how essential it is that all of us equally around the world, or communities or groups and so forth, have access to digital technologies and thus can benefit from this ability to connect, to use governmental services, health services, communicate, school, and educate their children online. So, and even in developing countries particularly, the access to digital technologies is even more critical. And I think the presentations that we've heard and we will continue to hear will emphasize the fact that it really is no longer something that is a luxury, but something that is essential for life to continue and for us to take full benefits of everything around us in society as well. So I think the discussion today about how we can bring everybody to be part of this digital online community is particularly key. And so I think a lot of colleagues were on previous social commission events where we emphasized the importance of digital technology and heard a lot of the arguments made today as to why really this is essential. So I'm not going to go over those grounds again, but simply to make a few points. That one, it is essential when it comes to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals that we harness digital technologies better. That in fact, it is something that is critical to the goals that we ourselves have set out as a target for the community. I give you an example that our World Food Program colleagues have actually just told me. The World Food Program says that $3.2 billion is actually needed to use digital technology to tackle malnutrition between now and 2030, because data that's acquired for decision making for 17 million children going through treatment and prevention processes could actually better help us address the question of malnutrition. So the core SDGs are fundamentally dependent on having digital technologies. So leave no one behind in achieving our global goals will require more efficient use of digital technology. Secondly, there was a question, I think, on the chat about how, in access, when it comes to access to mobile payment services, a lot of developing countries lag behind. And this actually has been an emphasis of the Secretary General and the UN's work, where the Secretary General had convened a task force on the digital financing of the SDGs, where it specifically addressed this particular point. How can mobile payments as well as digital financing better help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I do think that, again, in the COVID pandemic, we've seen some initiatives by which we've realized the extent to which digital financing, mobile payments are critical to social functioning. So for instance, in Kenya, for instance, we see a partnership between governments, the government, the regulator, as well as tech companies to make the mobile payment system, MPASA, actually free of fees so that there could be a waiver of payments. And so Kenyans could actually use that mobile payment services more effectively and freely during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think that speaks to another point that was raised by a previous speaker, that in finding solutions to digital technology and making sure that it's inclusive, there really needs to be a multi-stakeholder partnership among all sectors of society. It cannot just be governance alone. It has to be national regulators, governments, tech companies, as well as civil society, really raising the alarm bell and raising the call for there to be these types of partnerships that are to the benefit of all. The third point I would say is that digital technologies are fundamentally empowering. So as we talk about, for instance, the need to make sure that women are not left behind, that the elderly and the young also have access to these services, we also should not forget community groups such as refugees, where, for instance, UNHCR has had great success with programs that allow refugees to connect with close ones, to have their own businesses, digital ID, and mobile money. So in serving a lot of the communities that the United Nations has been set up to support and so forth, we really need to consider how we can actually use digital technologies to empower these groups as well, and to make sure that we can better serve the objectives of the United Nations. So I would say that part of this discussion of leaving no one behind is also really looking at the individual communities and making sure that they are best equipped to use digital technologies, and that the functions of the United Nations are best served as well by us partnering with multi-stakeholder partners, tech companies, and governments to bring forward the potential of digital technologies to all. The last point I would make quite quickly, given that I am running a little bit out of time, is what can we do next? And I think this is something that really is a call to action from all of us. The Secretary General had issued his roadmap for digital cooperation last year, which brings together a lot of the strands that we've been talking about here today: connectivity, digital inclusion, digital human rights, multi-stakeholder partnership, in a call for the international community to come better together in making a safe, online, affordable space for all to engage in the digital community online. And I really think that this is where a lot of the action strands that we're talking about and the policy brief that DESA is about to issue is really important in picking up these key elements here and calling for action from all of us to bring forward the Secretary General's roadmap and the collective goals of the Sustainable Development Agenda. So I think this is a place where partnerships can happen most effectively. The Office of the Tech Envoy has a mandate to foster these partnerships between stakeholder communities, the private sector, tech companies, as well as civil society groups, and bring them together with the United Nations system so that we can forge these multi-stakeholder alliances and partnerships in very concrete ways to take forward the goals of the Secretary General's vision. I just want to end very quickly with something that I heard in the previous CSocD event that some of you might have also listened in on, that was just this morning about digital inclusion, where one of the speakers had talked about the need for a new tech deal, a sort of a social agreement among tech companies and all of community to use digital technology. And in fact, the Secretary General himself has actually called for this, when he has called for a new social contract and a new deal, when he, at the Nelson Mandela lecture that he made last year, where he actually said that education and digital technologies are actually the biggest equalizers for the international community to galvanize now as we seek to build back better from COVID. So as we build back from COVID, we really also need to think about how we can build back digitally, making sure that digital technologies is indeed an equalizer for all communities, taking into account the needs and the priorities and the issues and the challenges faced by community groups such as the aged, the disabled, people with disabilities, women, the rural community, and so forth, and other marginalized groups, such that we can truly build a more inclusive digital society to the benefit of all and achieve the SDGs. I'll end there, and I really look forward to having more engagement with colleagues and participants during the dialogue.
Thank you so much, Yuping, for your very articulate kind of explanation of the connections, between lots of the things we do and a broader vision that's global digital cooperation and achieving the 2030 agenda. Thank you very much for your input. Next, we have Dr. Ifeanyi Ofong, who is a representative to the United Nations of a Worldwide Network Nigeria, Women in Development and Environment. You have the floor, Dr. Ofong.
Thank you so much for inviting me. A lot has been said with regards to leveraging technologies for social inclusion. So I want to go straight to, oh my God, okay. Yes, I want to go straight to my presentation, which will be focusing on the perspectives of some of those who are already excluded socially and digitally, such as women and girls. Let's take a little step backward to before COVID-19. We find out that many women and girls in rural areas were already living in poverty. They lacked the education and skills needed to access
Oh, please go ahead. I think that there was some echo. If I can ask all participants who are not speaking to mute their mic, that might help.
Sorry, Dr. Ify, can you try again?
Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes.
Oh my God. Let's see back. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so let me quickly go over to for social inclusion. The main objective of this side event is to examine how digital technologies can be used as an effective tool to build back better in the post-COVID-19 recovery phase. And laudable as these objectives are, we should ponder on why billions of people are still excluded despite the noted social and economic benefits of digital inclusion. Further, that rural women and girls face multiple barriers to digital inclusion, in addition to other underlying issues like poverty and inequality, which should be addressed in order to achieve digital inclusion for all and leave no one offline. Let's look at a few gaps. The first one is the access. There is a lot of problem, with accessing digital technologies, ranging from lack of network coverage and even the electricity that is needed to power devices to the actual location of consumers, like those who are in the rural areas and those in the urban areas. Now, the next one is the issue of affordability and cost of purchasing digital hardware and subscribing to the internet. These things remain the greatest barrier to owning mobile phone by rural women. Many of them and their children, they live in poverty and their income is generally low. They have less access to credit facilities and capital than men. For instance, in Nigeria, which is my country, the average cost of 1 gigabyte of mobile data is about $2.06, while the minimum wage is less than $80 per month. And again, this is even for those who are engaged in formal employment. Women, cater for very large families, and so they have very many contending expenditures. And with that in mind, they cannot afford the high cost of smartphones and sophisticated digital devices. Women tend to buy cheap devices that have poorer quality and connectivity, which enable lesser access to the internet and other devices. Then again, let's look at the issue of digital skills and literacy. Many women and girls who cannot access and use the internet is due to lack of digital skills or low literacy levels. And since that is the situation, of course, they are disadvantaged. They cannot be included digitally. In many developing countries, girls have poorer access to education than boys. And as a result, many of them are not very literate. Limited literacy leads on to lack of digital skills and lack of confidence to use the internet. Again, let's look at the issue of awareness and relevance of content. Yes, it's true that having awareness and understanding how the internet and digital technology works can actually help women and girls to connect or access opportunities. But the true situation here is that many of those rural women, if not all of them, they have low income, low literacy, and low awareness about the internet and what they can even gain from the internet. In addition to the social norms and cultural factors that shape women's lives in different ways, including the stereotypes around technology being something for the boys and for the men and not for girls and for women. So quickly, I want to look at the strategies that may help us to leverage digital technologies for social inclusion. The first one is that in order to close digital divide and leave no woman offline or no girl offline, we need workable and effective strategies in place to ensure that all women and girls have equal access and affordable access to digital technologies, particularly in rural and remote areas. Secondly, member states, in collaboration with stakeholders, must urgently address and respond to the threats that are arising from the negative use of ICTs and the ways it contributes to the sexual exploitation of women and children. Again, investments in building the technological capabilities and digital literacies of women and girls are very necessary and should include efforts within the formal education system. We should also remove the barriers, the gender barriers to ICT education and training by promoting equal training opportunities in ICT for women and girls. Furthermore, we should embark on ways to develop relevant content that will interest women and girls and encourage them to access the internet more often. Finally, extensive rural development is also needed to increase access to digital technologies in terms of network coverage and even the electricity supply that is needed to power these devices. Now, finally, let's look at the policy recommendations to enable us promote digital inclusion. Yes, we know that digital inclusion, the policies around it must provide universal, affordable, and secure access to digital technology for all. Therefore, we recommend policies that would foster women's economic and digital inclusion. Such policies will help women complement their social skills with training and contribute to digital technology spaces so that technological innovations will be designed with their needs in mind. Policies to increase funding for investment in ICT infrastructure, education, research, training, awareness raising, and access to digital technologies, particularly in remote and rural communities, through the establishment of community information and computer service centers with full internet access. Digital inclusive initiatives that will also encourage strong partnership between key community leaders, public and private sector organizations should be established to support and maintain access to the digital centers to ensure that everyone leverages the benefits of digital technology if we must leave no woman behind. In conclusion, I want to say that if we must build back better and achieve social inclusion, digital inclusion is key. Therefore, in pursuing digital inclusion, we must not lose focus on ending inequality and poverty, particularly within the developing countries. In addition, those social norms and cultural factors that shape women's lives, as well as those stereotypes around technology, being for boys and a men's thing, should be addressed urgently. Member states and private sector organizations must urgently invest in education and capacity building that will increase women and girls' digital skills through a lifelong learning approach. Digital equality is a must, and digital inclusion is a human right. Finally, let me emphasize the importance of having agreed measures for digital inclusion, as well as a reliable and comprehensive data that will provide a full picture of who is or not digitally included. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ify, for really highlighting the perspective, especially of women in Africa, and highlighting the structural factors, that is poverty and inequality in terms of digital divide. Next, I have the pleasure to invite Ms. Tania Rosas, who is the SDG Young Leader on Technology. Can I ask you, please try to stick to the time guideline. Thank you, Tania.
Thanks. Thank you a lot for this opportunity. Well, hello, my name is Tania. I am the co-founder of the Origen Foundation, where we are working with communities to provide access to inclusive digital education. There is an all too well-known story of inequality, kilometers and centuries long, power, knowledge, relationships, and frameworks that start with the power of education. In Colombia alone, there are more than 380,000 indigenous students, yet only 29% will finish high school, and only 5% access to higher education. This is an issue mainly caused by lack of accessibility, education, and connectivity. In this context, we aim to democratize education. As a political scientist and educational researcher, I am committed to make education inclusive for all communities, working with NGOs, community leaders, and schools across the world. Growing up in the region with the highest school dropout rates in the country, as well as the region with the highest population of indigenous people and poverty, I recognize that access to learning opportunities is the key to uphold sustainable development and fight against poverty, empowering young people. The way we are solving this global issue is through our OLAP, which is our offline personalized learning platform and app that is tailored to rural communities' needs, with a virtual tutor that can speak in different idioms and native languages to promote inclusivity and literacy. It works offline, and we are distributing it to rural communities and local schools across the world. It is adaptable and produces clear results that track learners' development and engagement with courses created by NGOs and institutions. By conversing closely with communities, we create feedback loops that make our platform and app all about interaction and development more than just about content. By creating strong partnerships and alliances with public and private sectors, OLAP becomes an ally to their missions to provide education and capacity building for everyone. This mode of partnerships allow us to build and provide a global solution while remaining a tool for local solutions as well. In this way, our mutual growth is exponential. This is why I believe that equality revolution and racial healing are a practice. And I believe that creating partnerships and using local solutions at a global scale can be the key to uphold sustainable development and leave no one behind. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really excited about being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for the perspective of the youth, and also for sharing the work of your foundation, and in terms of enabling access to education. I think this is a perfect segue to our next speaker, who is Mr. Rajit Singh Desali, who is a teacher at the Zila Parishad Primary School in India, and he is the winner of the Global Teacher Prize for 2020. We are very pleased and honored to have you with us today, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you so much for such a warm welcome. And I'm thankful to UN Commission for Social Development for inviting me to speak to you here today. It is said that doctors have saved lives of many during a pandemic, and teachers have saved future of the world, and technology is helping them to do so. When I first arrived in my school in 2009, I knew straight away that it would be a challenge. In India, there are often two types of obstacles to education. First is lack of resources and facilities, and my school at first it was located in between cattle shed and storeroom. The second obstacle is just traditional ideas about gender roles and education. For various reasons, the tradition in village was for girls to be get married as teenagers, and many left school before they had finished their educations. In general, girls' education was not taken very seriously, though it was not much better for the boys as well. In fact, only about quarter of the people in the village had finished their education. And as a result, attendance rate in the schools were sometimes as low as 2%, and students were not achieving expected learning outcomes. But I'm pleased to say we were able to turn these problems around. But how? First, there was the problem of students' poor learning. This was not only due to lack of support for girls' education. It was more about general problem with how children were being taught. I know that to really capture the students' attention, I would need more than textbooks. I would need to use other media beyond the printed page. And so I developed a way to add online material to students' learning experience by adding QR codes to the textbooks. This idea is that the students scan the QR code in a book with their mobile, and then it takes them to YouTube video on a topic or an educational website, or in some cases, a piece of audio format as well. I had recorded on myself. Most importantly, using different QR codes in this book, I could tailor the material to individual students or groups based on their learning style. We use poems, lectures, stories, and videos, etc. This can be very useful. For example, when students respond better to the video or any other visual media rather than text or audio, it can also be very helpful with students who have special learning needs. Most important, this way of teaching lets them learn in a guided way when they are at home. Our school happened to be the first school in Maharashtra state to use QR coded textbook. And but since then, this way of teaching has spread far and wide. And during the pandemic, during this COVID situation crisis, 22 million students have used this QR coded textbook. Even the schools were closed, but they were still learning sitting at home. The QR code feature has also been very important for encouraging girls' education. Girls' education was not taken very seriously in my village, and throughout many parts of the world, girls get less education than boys. 130 million girls globally are out of school. There are many reasons for this. One is that traditional societies tend to place more importance on boys' education because they believe that they will be a breadwinners and girls will have to raise the children. In other cases, caring responsibilities are placed on girls, and this limits time they can spend in a school. But sometimes there is also expectation that girls do not attend the school during their monthly cycle. This means they are away for few days. As a teacher, we have to try to convince parents that girls' education is worthwhile. This is important for the improvement and empowerment of girls and women, but there are also other reasons as well. So, how do we boost girls' education and get families to see it as worthwhile? Rather than lecturing parents, our approach has been one of the empowerment. We aim to build up girls' self confidence, skills, and voices, and then help them to be their own best advocates. The QR coded textbook have meant that even if girls are asked to shoulder some responsibilities at home or kept away from the school for some other reasons, they still can learn because they learn through other media beyond the textbook. They discuss, they express their thoughts and began to express themselves better and communicate more clearly. Over the last decades, we have made a great deal of progress. Parents in the community have started believing in girls' education and see that school offers them a great deal. Today, there is virtually 100% attendance in my school, and there are no recent teenage marriages. 85% of our students are getting A grades, and 98% have achieved expected learning outcomes before completing school year. Our school is now rated the best school in the district, and most importantly, parents are no longer viewing girls as lesser than the boys, and the ratio of girls to boys in the community has become more equal. So I think when you use technology in a meaningful way, the results can be seen like this. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your innovative solutions to the challenges you face. Like I said, truly is a pleasure to have you. I understand that the time difference is very late for you or early in the morning, and thank you so much for being with us. Now, I was told that we can extend our session by some minutes, so that I just want to read out a question that was raised to all panelists. That's about financial inclusion, access to digital payments platforms. And this came from Gerald Feinstein. And he particularly is asking how much could be done in this area to promote greater financial inclusion and greater access to digital financial payments through public-private partnerships. Are there any organs of the UN that are working on the problem? So I want to invite all speakers. You can use the raise your hand function if you want to comment to provide any kind of insights on this particular question that was raised. And I know Yuping had already addressed this this question in her intervention. I just want to ask if the other speakers want to join.
If I could also add a little bit, Wenyan, if you don't mind.
Hey, sure.
Just also to note that besides the Secretary General's task force on digital financing of the SDGs, if I'm not wrong, the UN Capital Development Fund. Sorry, little interruption there for my daughter.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's so cute.
I was just saying the UN Capital Development Fund, which is part of it's associated with the United Nations Development Program, if I'm not wrong, is also working on this idea of digital financing and mobile payments as well as part of a broader approach to capital development. So I think there are parts of the UN that are grappling with this idea of how can we use digitally enabled mobile financing and mobile payments. But you are right that in a sense, I don't think we've looked at it as a broader, more overarching policy issue. And that you are right, that this has to do a lot with how we basically function as a society in a digitally enabled environment. So in terms of multi-stakeholder partnerships, I also do think that this specific example is a good avenue for why we do really need these types of alliances and coalitions between government regulators, private sector companies, civil society, as well as community groups, because this is really how we're going to roll out technologies to achieve the SDGs and make profound differences to people's lives through something as simple as how do you pay your bills via your smartphone.
Yes, thank you so much, Yuping. That I don't see at other hands. Maybe I can also jump in to comment on the the whole program of financing for development. It's a very big project that all UN entities are involved, and DESA is very much in the center of kind of supporting member states in reaching agreements in the UN forums, as well as trying to mobilize the UN system to to really strengthen financing for sustainable development goals. And one of the very important aspects is financial inclusion, both in terms of access, in terms of the question of access to digital payment systems, which is a very important component of financial inclusion, but also the broader issue of financial inclusion. That is, we still have lots of people in the world, millions of people in the world who don't have access to a bank account and to any kind of financial services. They cannot save their income into a bank and then to build up credits. So that when they need to take a loan to expand their business or to do things that are important, they don't have access to credits. So that this is, I just want to say that, as Yuping echo what Yuping said, that there are UN programs and entities who are focusing on solutions to the problem of access to digital financial payment, as well as a system-wide, broader kind of a project, having this as a component of the overall sustainable development agenda and connected to finance for development. I don't want to abuse my my position as a moderator. So now Amin, help me. Do you have any hands raised that I don't see? No.
I think Wenyan, there's a one person, Hima Ahmed Hussan, raising hand, I think.
Okay, can can you?
Yeah, we have, I think, one question. Are you referring to the question?
No, the raise hand. One person and attendees raise hands. No, Hima.
Yeah, it's Himat, but we are not sure. We're asking everyone to submit their questions using the Q&A. So we are not using really the raise hand function.
Okay, got you. So,
thank you.
So that to the audience, if you have a question, we are not using the raise hand function, but you can type your question into the Q&A box. We will see it here. Then we would ask the panelists to respond to your question.
And when we have only one question, I don't know.
Yeah, I already read out
yes,
that
question,
right? So without, well, if we don't see more questions popping in, allow me to thank all the speakers for their contribution to this very interesting event, and especially to our speakers who are joining us from very far places in a different time zone. And I might say that this event itself is a demonstration of how digital technology is enabling, right, communication of ideas and collaboration and partnership. Without this technology, this platform, we wouldn't have been able to have this meeting. And also recognize we had about 70 participants. I would imagine the participants are also located in different parts of the world. So truly it has been a very interesting learning opportunity for myself. I hope that all of you had also benefited from being here. And just last words, look out to the DESA website for DESA policy brief so that you can get the full content of the policy brief on leveraging digital technology for social inclusion. So again, I thank everybody, panelists in particular, as well as to our participants for being here and for what you do in your own job to contribute to social development and to the greater 2030 agenda. Thank you very much. I have a good afternoon, good evening, or good morning.